Hi, this is Ryan Regan here. If you're watching this video right now, I assume you're probably an IB student struggling to do well on your TOK presentation, lacking some direction. Well, let me tell you about myself. I used to be an IB student before, and I got 11 out of 20 for my TOK presentation, which was quite miserable. And when I asked my teacher for feedback, she was never willing to teach me how to do it well, because she always said that the IB doesn't allow her to do so. She couldn't give extra tips to students. And I assume this is why you're watching it right now. But the bad thing about the TOK presentation is that not only if you don't have the right strategy, you won't do it well, and you'll waste a lot of time. And this is what happened to me before. But now, actually, we have a TOK team at Econ, and the head of our TOK team, Betty, she got 19 out of 20 for her TOK presentation. And she have devised a formula to help Econ students on how to do well on a TOK presentation, get at least 18 out of 20, and use less than 5 hours. Okay, because you have the right strategy, you're doing the right thing. The best thing about this is that you will have more time to study for other tests, because I understand as IB students, you're always filled with a lot. Now, let's get straight to the formula. When you start your TOK presentation, of course, you need a topic. So how can you find the right topic? Well, you first need to think about your life and see if there's any current event that really interests you, or any events in your life that interest you. Okay, and then based on that event in life, you develop what we call a knowledge claim. Okay, a knowledge claim. A knowledge claim is something that is commonly perceived as a fact. Okay, so let me use one example to illustrate. Okay, so recently in Hong Kong there has been massive demonstrations by university students, mainly and high school students. So they have basically occupied the streets in Hong Kong, the main streets in Hong Kong, major ways of transportations in Hong Kong. Okay, so, and they're fighting for universal suffrage. And of course, there's a lot of opposition amongst older citizens in Hong Kong. So let's say I'm trying to do a TOK presentation on this. Okay, so the knowledge claim would be, I think, one knowledge claim would be youth tend to be rebellious. Okay, so you can say something like, recently there has been massive demonstrations in Hong Kong. The youth have occupied the streets fighting for universal suffrage. There have been a lot of opposition from older people, and it is commonly perceived that youth tend to be more rebellious. Okay, so after you develop a knowledge claim, you need to develop two knowledge issues and explore them in your presentation. Okay, so what is a knowledge issue? Knowledge issue is basically how you can test whether or not the claim is true. Okay, knowledge issue, you can think of it as ways to test whether your knowledge issue is correct. Okay, so your knowledge issue, the key in developing knowledge issues, you have to relate it to the ways of knowing and the areas of knowledge. Okay, ways of knowing. So ways of knowing means how you know something. Okay, so for example, intuition, perception, evidence, reasoning, memory, and authority. Okay, so if you don't know what these means, you should look over a textbook, your TOK textbook. It would give it to you quite clearly. And then areas of knowledge. Okay, areas of knowledge are the different subject areas. Okay, so you develop two knowledge issues, and you try to testify your knowledge claim. Okay, so for example, going back to the example of the youth tend to be rebellious. Okay, so the knowledge issue, for example, so the knowledge issue is always framed like this. So how can A and B show youth is rebellious? So for example, we can say, how can history and evidence show that youth is rebellious? So in that case, we may try to look at different historical events to find evidence as to whether or not youths tend to be more rebellious compared to other age groups. Okay, and then for example, we can also, another knowledge issue could be, how can economics and reasoning suggest why youth is rebellious? Because a lot of Hong Kong people, they believe that the main reason why youths in Hong Kong are so rebellious is because wages are down, but the average price level is going up much faster in Hong Kong. So a lot of young people, they can't afford to build their families, they can't afford to buy homes, and this is why they feel a lot of dissatisfaction towards the current economic system. They feel that they can't have a bright future. So you can look at economic data and use your reasoning to see whether or not it is justifiable that the youths are rebellious because of of a dark economic future ahead of them. Okay. Okay, presentation, the conclusion is always that truth is relative. So for example, going back to our example that youth tend to be rebellious, well, I'm sure that if you look through history, there are some cases where youth tend to be more rebellious than the rest of the population, but in some cases, actually, youth may not be particularly rebellious, okay? So, and even in economics, if you look at it, maybe, well, it is certainly true that lower and lower proportion of the young people are able to afford housing in Hong Kong, but that is only for some young people, not for all. So both of these evidence would suggest that youth is relative. Okay, to a certain extent, youth tend to be more rebellious, but not all youths are rebellious. Okay, so I think you get the idea. Okay, so the structure of your TOK essay, I'll repeat, of your TOK presentation is, first of all, you talk about your knowledge, you talk about the real life situation, okay, to talk about why it interests you. Okay, and then explain how it links to your knowledge claim. Okay, so for example, the Occupy Central in Hong Kong, youths protesting in Hong Kong, leads us to examine the knowledge claim that youths tend to be more rebellious. Okay, then we have two knowledge issues to testify whether this knowledge claim is correct. The first knowledge issue is, so you talk about your two knowledge issue and after you raise the knowledge issue, you show data. Okay, you analyze based on the knowledge issue. Okay, so and then you make your conclusion, which is always truth is net relative, and then you use your evidence to back that up.